Hello, and welcome to another episode of Voices of the Disabled, brought to you by Adaptive Chicago Productions. I'm Joel Margolis, your host, and with me today are Fred Friedman, who is the founder of the organization NextSteps, and Matt Perry, who is the NextSteps full-time staff member. We're here today to learn from them all about NextSteps, an organization which seeks to amplify or heighten the voice of the mentally ill, the homeless, those with substance abuse, to give greater voice to them in the formulation of policies and guidelines of the social welfare agencies that deliver services to precisely those groups. Fred, it's my understanding that your founding of NextSteps came out of your experiences as a client of social welfare agencies. Could you tell us briefly how you came to be a recipient of services from those agencies?
Well, Joel, first of all, thank you for having us on.
It's our pleasure.
It's wonderful. Yes, so about 16, 17 years ago, I'm a person with severe, chronic, persistent mental illness. About 17 years ago, when my symptoms became particularly acute, I lost nearly everything that was important to me. I lost my wife of 24 years, my profession of 20 years, and my home of 10 years.
Could you tell us a little bit about what you were doing, at least occupationally, before you became a disabled person?
I was a community organizer. I worked with an organization called West Side Alliance for Safe, Toxic-Free Environment. That was an organization of people who lived on the West Side, environmental groups and community groups trying to improve the environment. I studied economics in college. I then went to law school, and I had decided that I couldn't practice law because, and I practiced law for many years, I had decided that I couldn't really practice law because my symptoms.
So you went into community organizing.
So I went into community organizing.
Okay. Now, after you became a disabled person, what were, if you don't mind naming a few of them, some of the organizations from which you were receiving social welfare services?
So back in 99, when my symptoms were particularly acute, my wife divorced me and decided, after 24 years, decided to put me into what's called an IMD, or it's called a nursing home, and it was the Clayton Residential Nursing Home. It was, some people thought, my wife certainly thought it was the best, but I found it terrible. After I was there for a while, I decided that I needed to get services, so I went into a homeless shelter, and the homeless shelter I went to was paid for by the ARC, which is a Jewish social service agency on the north side.
So you were receiving services from the ARC and from any other agencies as well?
I got mental health services from the city clinics of Chicago.
And did you personally have experiences, either negative or positive or in between, that led you to feel that these organizations somehow were making mistakes in their policy formulation or administrative guidelines?
Well, at that time, and probably unfortunately today, the idea was if you were sick enough to go into a nursing home, you would be there for the rest of your life. They had no idea that I could recover. In fact, the concept of recovery was a bare idea. They got paid as long as I remained sick and in that institution.
So that led you to seriously question the assumptions that they made in giving care?
Yes, they to the extent that I thought I could get better, they thought that I lacked insight into my illness.
And you had experiences like this with some other social welfare agencies as well?
Well, so I have suffered from serious mental illness all my life. I first attempted suicide when I was 13 years old. Almost inevitably, when my wife and I or I would seek services, they would misunderstand how sick I would get, and then they would misunderstand how well I would get. They were wrong, and so when we would go and tell them that I was becoming dysfunctional, they would say, you're just self-fulfilling prophecy. And then when it happened, and I then would say, and I will get better, they would say, you're lacking insight into your illness.
And this clearly dramatized that there was something lacking in the way they formulated their techniques. That seems very clear. Now, was it to the ARC that you first went with your suggestion that clients be made part of the process of formulating techniques?
Well, no, actually the first place I went to was an organization called the Continuum of Care, which was an organization that worked on was designed to end homelessness. And I started attending meetings because that's what I do. And eventually I wanted to be on the board of the Continuum of Care. And I was told that I couldn't be because I was homeless.
So when they said to you that you could not be on the board because you were homeless, how did you respond to them?
Well, because I'm a lawyer by training, I said, show me that in writing. That makes no sense.
And were they able to show you anything?
No, in fact, what they showed, well, they showed me two things. One, they had no set of bylaws. And two, to the extent that the government gave them instructions, it said people with lived experience of homelessness should be a part of the organization.
All right, so clearly you found some flaws there. So they then offered you a position on the board? Or
yeah, so I eventually became the first person with lived experience of homelessness on the board. I'm very proud to say that now, 16 years later, we're 25% of the board, and every 3 years, one of us chairs the board.
And when you say we're 25% of the board, you mean to say that those with lived experience of homelessness. Okay, but when you first joined the board, how did other board members react to your presence?
Well, I think this T-shirt sort of represents it best. So I was in a meeting, so this was 15 years ago, and there was a debate over housing first, which is you provide housing first, and housing ready. You provide housing after people are ready. And we were having a debate, and one of the providers said, what you don't understand is homeless people are like wild animals. They need to be housebroken before you let them in their home.
Homeless people are like wild animals?
Yes.
That was literally his or her words?
Yes. So I raised my hand and said, you know, you're talking about me. And she, of course, said, now, what's important, she said, of course, you're different, Fred. And I said, well, no, I'm not. And then I got this T-shirt so that they would never forget that they were talking about, and I would never forget that I'm not different, that I am just a person with a severe mental illness at risk of homelessness.
So when you first joined the board, you found that at least some people had what we might call a real ignorance of the homeless and their experiences?
Yes. Ignorance isn't exactly the right word. So this person who said it had devoted her life to helping the homeless. But her experience is that we were bad, stupid people that couldn't help ourselves. And with that was in fact a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you treat people that way, then people are going to act that way.
Well, it sounds then as if part of your role on the board was in effect to educate board members to realities with which they were not familiar?
Yes. So we frequently say that while you are the expert on the homeless system, in some ways, we are the real experts on the homeless system because we know what it's like to actually live under the system, and you don't.
So it was your experiences on that board that perhaps not totally, but largely determined you to form an organization to promote presence like yours on the boards of other social welfare agencies?
Well, so originally I formed NextSteps with the executive director of the Continuum of Care and the founder of Chicago Coalition for the Homeless.
And when was that?
So that was in 2013.
And did you start it right from the outset as a...
Oh, I'm sorry, it wasn't 2000, it was 2003.
2003.
Yeah.
And you started right from the outset as a not-for-profit organization?
Yes, and we got a 501c3, and our mission was just to increase the role of people with lived experience in the continuum of care.
And then from there, you moved on to try to increase the participation of people like yourself
Yeah.
on other boards?
Yes. So eventually, the two of them couldn't continue. One of them died, and then the other one decided that he needed to make a living. And so we decided to expand the mission of Next Steps from just homelessness to also mental health services. And yeah.
And in expanding the mission, okay, did you have any paid staff to work on this?
No, I work for $1 a year plus some benefits. I worked for $1 a year plus some state benefit. That's why one of the founders decided he needed to make a living, and sometimes I would have somebody who would work 10 hours a week.
So Next Steps was originally not only a not-for-profit, but a not-for-profit without paid staff.
Yes.
Now, it's my understanding, Matt, that all that changes when you come on board. Am I correct in that? You were the first paid staff member?
Full-time, yes.
Full-time paid staff member. Now, this is clearly an important step forward, no pun intended, for Next Steps. But where is the money coming from for this?
It's coming from a federal grant from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. They give out, 6 or 7 grants per year to groups such as ours across the country to develop a statewide consumer network of what they would call mental health consumers.
Now, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration is, to be clear, a federal government agency, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And have they given you a grant for 1 year only?
It's for the next 3 years.
Oh, for the next 3 years?
That's right.
Okay. And will pay you to work on the mission full-time?
That's right.
And Fred, are you continue to be a board member of Next Steps?
Well, I'm not a board member. I get paid, and it pays him, it pays Matt. He works 100% on the grant. I spend 25% on the grant.
So Next Steps now has, if I may put it this way, 1.25 staff members.
Yes.
Okay. Matt, since you are the full-time staff member, what is it you're doing on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis to try to heighten the voice of people such as Fred in the boards and policy formulation of the social service agencies?
Well, I think one of our first steps before we get to that point is just to make ourselves known and become familiar with the people who identify as being in mental health recovery across the state of Illinois. Recently, I went to an interfaith mental health conference in Addison, which is an hour west of here.
And they are held in other places around the state as well?
We went to one in Springfield, which was actually put on by the local regional department for the Division of Mental Health in Illinois.
Now, who attends these conferences?
Largely people who have used mental health services and identify as being in recovery. And the conferences themselves consist of a lot of speakers, of people with lived experience, and consist of workshops for life skills and for dealing with your life, everything that constitutes.
Now, when you go to these conferences, what is it that you actually do while you're there? Do you usually address the group with a formal presentation?
We would like to very soon, but for the most part, we network and we talk to people and we try to meet with them and talk about the organizations they may be in and what kind of work they're doing and how we may be able to collaborate in mental health policy in Illinois.
And let me interrupt, because this is actually important. We believe that it is more important that we listen to them than that they listen to us. So we're going to these places to learn from people with lived experience throughout the state.
And then you're building, if I may put it this way, a repertoire of information about their lives, not merely contact with them, but information they give you about their experiences?
Yes, and how the system can be better. We have our ideas, but it's more important that we represent their ideas.
Now, Matt, I assume you make note of these people's names and, if possible, where they can be reached. Are you gradually building then a data bank of people who will form a potential pool of those to eventually, hopefully, be in advisory capacity at social welfare agencies?
Yes, most definitely. Right now we're working on a report where we try to identify all service agencies in the state of Illinois, but also the role of peer voice and empowerment and participation within those agencies.
Now, you're coming into these groups representing NextSteps, which is an organization that up until your arrival, the majority of them have not heard of it, I assume?
I don't know of a majority. NextSteps is pretty prominent in Illinois. I couldn't tell you how many people do and do not know about that. Fred's probably
So
more
in some
qualified.
cases, NextSteps is known, okay?
Yes.
Does that mean, though, that you usually have a favorable reception from these people, or are there sometimes a reluctance on their part to welcome you?
I haven't been met with any reluctance so far. A lot of the people I've met have been very enthusiastic about the idea of building a statewide consumer network. I think they feel a strong need for it, given the place of mental health in Illinois politics currently.
Okay.
Yeah.
And after you build and what will hopefully be an extensive network, what will, no pun intended, your next steps be?
Well, that's where we'll have to sit down and do the hard work of figuring out what people can do in their communities and what work needs to be done in their agencies. And that's a much bigger conversation. And if I were a prophet, I could tell you what it would look like concretely. Fred, do you have any remarks on that?
Yeah, so we're building on the relationships that we already have. So we know about the continuum of care, so we're going to work with the continuum of care and improve how they deal with people who are both homeless and mentally ill. Then we will go to the other continuums of care around the country. We have a relationship with Thresholds. We will work with them, then we will take their model to the other agencies around the country.
Now, you are naturally working with Continuum of Care, given your in-depth experience with them. How did you make a contact with Thresholds, which I understand does some in-depth work with those with mental illness?
Well, I was very lucky. I, again, was the first person with disclosed lived experience of mental illness on Thresholds board. Now, there's 3 of us. I keep telling them that they need 8 more, but we'll see how that works.
So in addition to being a groundbreaker, so to speak, in joining the board of Continuum of Care, you have also been a first ever at the board of Thresholds as well?
I'm pretty sure that there was somebody with mental illness symptoms before, but the stigma was so strong that no one would admit it until I came on.
So you were the first board member at Thresholds who really came out, so to speak?
Yes.
Okay. And are you continuing to serve on their board?
I'm continuing on their board. I'm on their executive committee. I'm on their program committee.
Okay. And do you envision a day when NextSteps might hold conferences of its own, inviting large numbers of program participants to come forward and work with you?
Yes. We 5 years ago, we had a small conference. About 130 people showed up. We would love to have larger conferences.
Okay. And Matt, do you foresee that you will be traveling around the state doing what you do now, but doing it, let's say, a year and a half from now? Or do you see a transition coming at some point, let's say 9 or 12 months from now, in which your activities will shift somewhat?
No, I think we'd actually like to increase the amount of traveling I do around the state. Part of our work is to be present at between 36 and 50 peer-led meetings throughout the state. And as we go to listen to these people, we'd like to do that more and more and more.
Now, in addition to your travel around the state and these very direct person-to-person contacts, have you developed other forms of linkage as well? For instance, are you putting out something like a newsletter at NextSteps?
Not yet, no.
You say not yet, suggesting that at some point you'll want to do that?
Absolutely, yeah. We haven't yet developed a media content strategy for our operation, but that's one of the things that's in the works. As I said, we're very young. We're in the incubator
stage. Do you already have an internet presence?
We have a Facebook page.
You have a Facebook page, and is that under the name NextSteps?
NextSteps NFP.
NextSteps NFP, for those who want more information about it. Now, this grant pays for you full-time, Matt, and for you, Fred, 1/4 of your time. Are you hopeful of finding additional funding? And if so, where might you look?
So my dream is that in 4 years from now, I'll retire, and there will be a full-time organizer for mental health issues, a full-time organizer for mental health service, for homeless services, a full-time organizer for the justice system, full-time organizer for substance abuse, and another person who will be the head organizer. So we're going to seek grants to do that. We're 1/4 of the way on this wildly optimistic dream.
So you foresee a day when NextSteps will have probably 4, 5, or even 6 full-time staff people?
Yes.
Okay. And an office of its own, I presume?
Yes.
Okay.
And support staff, all the stuff that goes along with it.
And you're already working on grant applications to seek that funding?
This is the first. It's a 5-year plan. This was the first year of the plan. We have Matt. Next year, I will work on the other parts of the plan.
Matt, you have what sounds like a one-of-a-kind job, if I may put it that way. How did you come to be in this position?
Well, I have lived experience with mental illness myself. There was a long phase of wayward, severe depression while I was in college in California, and even thereafter. I ended up leaving that school where I was at without a degree, and was in a period of deep depression for 2 years or so while I was at home. And I was trying very hard to find people who were engaged in mental health politics and organizing or a cultural change or something like that. And I happened to stumble into a mental health summit meeting, which is a meeting of providers that meets once a month at the university. And Fred was there, and he invited me to dinner the next night with some other people who were going to have a talk about stigma. And then after that, he invited me to a board meeting. After that, he invited me onto the board of NextSteps. After that, I began a program in public policy and administration with a concentration in mental health policy, and it just kind of snowballed from there.
So it was actually a fortuitous happenstance that led you to meet Fred, if I understand you correctly.
Yes.
And then from there, it was a rolling stone that did gather moss.
Absolutely.
Okay. And do you hope to expand NextSteps beyond the state of Illinois at some point during the life of this grant?
During the life of this grant? Well, this grant is strictly for the state of Illinois.
Oh, that was a
Yes.
condition of the grant?
It is, yes.
I see.
But Fred's got his 5-year plan, and I suppose I can have a 10 and 15-year plan where we'll take over the country too.
Fred has his
Yeah.
5-year plan. I see. Now, since this grant was only for this state, are there any other states where there are similar grants and efforts underway?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, we'll be taking part in a phone call this afternoon where all of the representatives from grant recipients will be talking with SAMHSA.
Do most states now have a grant of this sort and a program of this sort underway?
I don't think most. Fred, do you know?
Well, there's 24, so there's actually 8 every. It's a 3-year grant, and every, so there's 8, and 8 people are selected every year. 8 organizations.
8 organizations.
So there's 24 of us. Until we got this grant, we, the state of Illinois, was the only large state, the state with over 5 million people, that didn't get one of these grants. So we're very excited. We were way overdue to get this grant.
So NextSteps is not only a new organization, it's breaking new ground in the state of Illinois?
Well, there's lots of people who have done recovery work over the years, but this grant is new, I think.
And
That,
the
to my
effort
knowledge,
to
yeah.
bring people from recovery onto the boards of organizations of the sort you described, that is a new effort.
Yes. Well, I think of it as a new effort. Obviously, lots of people have thought about it before I did.
But not many of them acted on it quite as you did.
Yes.
Okay. And beyond continuum of care and thresholds, do you now see signs of the presence of either those in recovery from mental illness or formerly homeless gradually making their way onto other boards other than 2 organizations you've mentioned?
Well, one of the changes in the 15 years that I've been doing this is the stigma attached to mental illness is much less than it was. So 15 years ago, it would have been inconceivable that people would admit that they had symptoms of mental illness. Now, we were in a class with a professor the other day who admitted that she had symptoms of mental illness.
So there's been a great change in the context
Yeah.
surrounding this whole discussion.
Yes.
And it seems like the 2 of you have seized that change in context to push forward a new opportunity.
In part, I suppose.
Yeah, we're part of a much larger movement.
But definitely a very active part, okay? I want to thank both of you for coming in today.
Thank you so much for having
And for
us.
those
Thank
who
you.
want more information about NextSteps, they should go onto Facebook and simply type in NextSteps.
NextSteps NFP.
NextSteps NFP, or if they Google NextSteps NFP, will your Facebook page come up?
I think so. Or they could email either Matt or I at me, it would be Fred at nextstepsnfp.org. And if it's Matt, it would be Matt, M-A-T-T, at nextstepsnfp.org.
And just to make sure we have that correctly, that was Fred at nextstepsnfp.org or Matt at nextstepsnfp.org. And you will be happy to respond to inquiries.
We would love to.
Sounds very good indeed. I want to thank you both for coming in today and for sharing so very, very much with us in this very informative discussion. And I want to thank all of you in the audience for joining us once again for another episode of Voices of the Disabled, brought to you by Adaptive Chicago Productions. I'm Joel Margolis, your host. Please come and visit with us again as we continue in our effort to try and give greater voice to those in the disabled community and to those concerned with the disabled.